morning, and thank you all for being here. I'm Ann Vogel, Director of the Ohio EPA on behalf of Governor DeWine. It's a real pleasure to be here at the gorgeous Mentor Marsh. It's exciting to see how much progress has been made really in just the last year since the big kickoff. But to see what's happened in the area where the salt was, but also to see what you all have done with what was historically not really usable or functional. And I really want to thank our partners at the Cleveland Natural History Museum for being here, and we'll hear a few words from them in a little bit. This salt, obviously, you all know, was contaminated by many things, a lot of invasive species, but also the salt. In 2013, Attorney General DeWine filed a lawsuit against the entity responsible for the salt damage, and we've seen what progress has been made since that time, since the consent decree in 2019, so it's beautiful space. $500,000 in H2Ohio funding will go to support the museum, the Mentor Marsh Coastal Restoration Project, which will monitor and remove invasive species for years to come and grow these native plants that will provide overall health and quality of the wetland. This space is an example of the amazing possibilities for cleanup and restoration of other sites throughout the state of Ohio. So today we're here to see the Mentor Marsh, but we're also here for the Ohio EPA to announce the remaining H2Ohio funding for year 4 of H2Ohio. This is the governor's signature water quality initiative that I know you're all familiar with, and we thank the General Assembly for their continued support of H2Ohio. $2.1 additional million will go to 4 communities in need of repair and replacement of aging water infrastructure across the state of Ohio. These communities include Donaldsville, getting a drinking water distribution system that will provide safe, reliable water to more than 100 homes that are currently served by wells. In Magnetic Springs, which is in Union County, $400,000 is going to a wastewater collection system that will serve another 110 homes and enable them to abandon their individual household sewage treatment systems. Ravenna in Portage County will be able to eliminate failing household sewage treatment systems for 10 homes and connect them to a public sewer system. In Summit County, $500,000 for wastewater and drinking water improvements for the village of Peninsula, which does not have sanitary sewers or public drinking water. We're really excited at Ohio EPA to provide this gap funding for these communities that cannot otherwise afford to get loans to pay for these important infrastructure projects. So I want to thank you all again for being here. In the interest of rain and time, I'm going to introduce David Kriska to say a few words from the Natural History Museum. Thank you for being here. Thank you all.
Thanks everyone for coming out. Welcome to Northeast Ohio, right? Coldest and wettest part of the state. Can you imagine being here a decade ago and this boardwalk was covered with this Phragmites. This is an invasive plant. We had some that was 24 feet tall and it covered this boardwalk, so it was like going through a tunnel. So I got to set that stage. So that's what I'm going to talk about just for a few minutes. As one of the most species-rich sites on the Great Lakes, this was designated the marsh in 1966 as a national natural landmark by the National Park Service. And then the National Audubon Society designated it as an important bird area. And then, I think most significantly, in 1971, it was designated as Ohio's very first state nature preserve. This was a time when state parks existed, but not state nature preserves. The campaign to protect the marsh in the early 60s galvanized the community. Protecting a swamp and a forest in the 60s just didn't happen. And so we had hundreds of small dollar donors and a campaign with lots of local partners, including some of the people here today. And just when we had success protecting the eastern basin, tragedy struck. This tragedy we all know about. This 800-acre wetlands suffered dramatically in 1966 when salt mine tailings were dumped into a creek, Blackbrook Creek, nearby. And within 3 days, the museum's phone went off the hook that the marsh was dying. And within a few weeks, the whole place was dead. All the trees had died. And this nearly 4-mile-long wetland basin that you're standing in, was invaded by this Phragmites grass that I mentioned. Based on stem counts, we had a staggering 1 billion stems of this plant. We found some stems of this non-native invasive that's from Eurasia that were 24 feet tall. The grass is highly flammable, and after yet another Phragmites grass fire that burned 400 acres and the boardwalk that you're standing on Arbor Day of 2003, the museum decided to push back that Phragmites from along the boardwalk, and lo and behold, all these native plants came out of the seed bank. This was in part, we found out later on, that the landfill had been capped in 1987, and the stream rerouted around it so that all the salt pollution and lime kiln fly ash pollution was going along Route 44, letting this stretch of the marsh essentially get washed clean. So that was super exciting. We found that out with one of our critical partners, the Lake County Soil and Water Conservation District. They monitored the salt and said, hey, you're in good shape here. And all these plants you see, everything you see around you, all came out of the soil seed bank, this just sitting there waiting for release from the tall Phragmites. And so with that data in hand, the museum was emboldened to take on a massive restoration project. We really got serious in 2014 with many competitive funding sources, including Ohio EPA's, the WRSP program, the Water Resource Restoration Sponsorship Program in the Eastern Basin, and then, thank you, Director Vogel, we mashed all that Phragmites down to let the sunlight expose those seeds, and they all came out. And it's sort of a build it and they'll come story. Tons of rare plants, including 3 state listed ones. Lots of rare birds have shown up, American and least bitterns, and Virginia rails, king rails, soar rails, all these birds that birders go gaga about. They all started showing up, and the birders showed up in mass. And now this is one of the top 25 bird watching destinations in the state. Just for the sheer number of birds that have been seen here, puts it at top 25. We had one volunteer that had counted 5,000 waterfowl coming in every night to roost here. So another partner, Lake County Ducks Unlimited chapter, loves to hear that. They have helped volunteer here. Several new state record birds and county record birds have shown up. Besides that, fish. There's a good fish story too. Yellow perch fingerlings. We had no records of yellow perch fingerlings. That's a really important fish for the Lake Erie economy. They started showing up and using the marsh as a nursery. And then another one that the anglers really love, northern pike have shown up. And these are females that are coming back to spawn where they were born at. And this last season we caught a record 3.5 footer. So we're talking about a fish like this that's and so the restoration of all that biodiversity really helps filter the nutrients and filter the sediments coming out of here, and is a win-win both for the fish and for the community and for Lake Erie. So while we're making lots of progress, without the support of H2Ohio, we would never have be able to complete this project. And so there's lots of partners. You always want to recognize your partners. Lake County Soil and Water Conservation District, there's so many. Lake Erie Protection Fund, Ohio Department of Natural Resources, City of Mentor, Congressman Dave Joyce for supporting the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, the Ohio chapter of the Nature Conservancy, I think I mentioned the Clean Ohio Conservation Fund, Lake County Land Bank for taking on the salt fill and holding that, the Federal Natural Resource Conservation Service. This guy hiding behind the poster here, Bill Zawiski with the Ohio EPA, is shepherding the salt fill removal. And then finally, David Emmerman over there for stewarding the lawsuit and getting those settlement funds to help remove that salt, because last November, the big news, they removed all that salt. And so thank you for stewarding that, and that's all. So thanks everyone for coming out.
Well, thank you. Did you want to say a few words on the land bank?
Thanks. I'm going to be short and sweet.
Yeah, give me the whole
All right. So I didn't prepare remarks. But
introduce yourself.
I'm John Rogers. I am the director of the Lake County Land Bank. I have a couple of the board members here. I've got Mike Zern in the back, who's also the county treasurer, and then we have Ken Filipiak, who's also a board member, but also the city manager for the city of Mentor. And then my assistant Linda, who takes most of my calls. You know, a couple of years back, when I was in the State House, Sean O'Brien, now Judge O'Brien, but then a senator, had contacted me on behalf of the EPA and asked whether or not we would be willing to consider becoming involved in what this project has become. And it took a little work. Dave was a big help. And but we got all the wrinkles ironed out, and we took title to the property. We've given 30 of the acres that we took title to the Natural History Museum. I'm sorry, there's Dan Troy as well here, former commissioner, state rep. And then I'm told that because of the cleanup and how well we've done so far, by the end of the year we should be able to turn over the remaining 30 acres to the Natural History Museum. And they're really the caretakers of this area. They've done a great job in helping to restore. The funds from the state of Ohio are helping to do exactly what the director said. And I live right around the corner over here, so I live on the water, and my kids have grown up here, and I was a prosecutor when all of this stuff burned down, but usually juveniles. But I'm just glad to say that we have reached a plateau, and it's going to continue to grow. And to the extent that we are partners, I appreciate the opportunity to help. So it's good stuff. All right. Thank you, Director. Yep.
All right. Well, thank you all again for being here. I appreciate all the partnerships. This is such a great example of all the partnerships that have come together to as you can see, make a huge success. Thanks, Bill. Thank you all.